Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the next segment in the three-part mini-series that I have been doing with my wonderful former teacher, Frank Clifford from the London School of Astrology. Frank, as always, it's an absolute pleasure to have you, and it's actually really an honor for me to have my old teacher here. So just a little bit about Frank. He is an astrologer, a working astrologer, has been for over 3 decades, which is incredible, and is the owner and the guy who is in charge of the London School of Astrology. So I'm going to hand you over. You've already met Frank, but Frank, please introduce yourself to everybody. Tell them where they can find you.
Oh, hi, Raf. Thank you. Thanks very much. Yes, I'm feeling terribly old after that introduction. I mean, I've been in astrology now 35 years, but I started when I was 16, so I'm sort of allowed to feel a little bit old this year. I am, yeah, been an astrologer, writer, consultant. My big thing is you can learn a subject, but you don't really learn it unless you see clients, unless you teach it as well, if you have the opportunity. And it's you've been put on the spot by students. What does this mean in my chart? And then working with that really teaches you to keep learning and to keep on your toes. So I would say I'm an astrologer that never has never stopped being a student as well. As you say, I run the LSA. You can find me on londonschoolofastrology.com. I'm also on Instagram, but not the sort of, and YouTube and all of that, but not the same sort of way that you are, Raf. But I think I'm Astrologer Frank on Instagram.
Yeah.
Uh, so that's as much of, you won't get me TikToking just yet.
Yeah. Oh, well, I look forward to the day. So yeah, in terms of the old thing, Frank clearly has a Gemini thing going on because, dude, since I've known you, you literally have not aged. So you're obviously doing something well.
I'm getting
Um,
grayer, definitely grayer, but but
Also, what you said about the constant learning that we do in the work that we do, so important. And I think one of the things that you have really helped me take on board for myself and the work that I do, especially when teaching tarot, is to be okay with not having every answer and saying, I will learn on the journey with you. And I definitely agree. There's nothing like teaching to make you really, really brush up what you know and hone your skills for sure. So thank you for that reminder. Okay, so today we are going to be delving into transit in astrology. So what I love most about this part of things is this is what people really want to know when you open up a subject, right? Like, how does it work? So to give a bit more insight into astrological tools, can you explain what a transit is?
Right. Okay. Well, a transit is based on what's going on in the sky at any given moment. So at the moment, we know that Pluto moved into Aquarius a little bit early in the year. It's popped back into Capricorn. So if that is activating your chart in some sort of way, the degree of that planet, then you're having a transit. The whole world, all 8 billion of us, plus animals and mammals and everybody else, and fish, all have the same planets at the same positions by transit. But of course, you may be going through a particular transit that's activating the sun in your chart or the moon in your chart. So those are what is known as transits. They're the body, the constantly moving planetary bodies around the sun and how they're speaking to your personal chart. That's what we call a transit.
Yeah, I love it. I always say to people as well, like, just like humans, when we're in transit, like we're going from one place to another, a planet will move through a sign or a portion of the sky, and that's obviously speaking to whatever's taking place for us, mere mortals on the ground. Okay, so question. So when you're looking at a transit in terms of somebody's chart, obviously it will show up in personal ways for a lot of people. Those are considered aspects, right? As opposed to just the transits.
Yes, yes. So, for example, if you're having a Pluto transit to your sun, that could be a conjunction, meaning they're the same part of the zodiac. It could be an opposition. It could be at right angles, what we call a square. So there are transits, but there are also particular transits. So you might have what we call a transiting Pluto conjunct your sun or opposite your sun. So it in many ways, it's still the same thing. It's just a slightly different dialogue with the transit. And really, we start with looking at what Pluto means and what it may be opening up, waking up in your natal chart.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's really important as well. Like nowadays we have, and I'm totally guilty of this at certain points as well. Like when you hear of a transit or you see it or you think about it, it can be really easy to kind of reduce it to just what it is. But I really like that reminder, like to think about, what is the planet's energy doing? What is it saying? What does it mean for you in your specific chart and how that might show up as well? All really, really important. So another question, so many questions today. When you see a transit playing out on the wider world stage, have you noticed that there is a sort of direct correlation in how that translates to people on a personal level? Like you still feel the overall theme of that transit, but it just happens in a very personal way?
Yes, it can do. I mean, a good example is, of course, the whole lockdown that we had for a
Yeah.
couple of, that was really triggered by in the sky. It was triggered by a Saturn-Pluto conjunction in the sign of Capricorn. And not only are transits happening to our charts, they're also aspecting each other. So in the sky, every 30 something years, Pluto and Saturn come together and they start a new cycle, a bit like the sun and moon. There's a new moon once a month, and 2 weeks later, there's a full moon. And then 2 weeks after that, there's a next new moon in the next sign. So planets have their own cycles with each other. So a good example is the Saturn Pluto of 2020. And then we know that lockdown affected many, many people. It wasn't just a one-off transit, but we know that it affected certain people in quite different ways from others. A lot of people were deeply frustrated, out of work. A lot of people found it a time for creative freedom as well during that time. So in a way, under what we sort of would consider as rigid control, Saturn and Pluto together, it obviously didn't do the same thing for everybody. It wasn't hitting the same part of everybody's chart. And of course, when we're looking at forecasting, we're not just looking at what's happening in your chart, but looking at what's happening in your country. If you're living in a country where there's war, there's major disruption, or there's poverty, famine, transits are really out of the window, because your fate is affected by what the leaders are doing and who's blowing up who and all sorts of terrible travesties and so I always say to people, look, these are the transits happening, but on a global scale, you can look at where the planets are, and it talks about the era that we live in. So they're the ones when we look up and says, oh, Pluto's moving into Aquarius, that's a new era for the world. But on an individual level, it will depend so much on where you are, your age, and I think, as we said in the first talk, it can be so different depending on so many other factors in your life as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and the personal element of what we do is always comes into play, right? And as you say, no transit is going to affect everybody the same. I think, which is one of the reasons the pandemic and that whole experience was so, one, because it played out in terms of the astrology so literally, like social distancing and, like you said, like rigid control. Like it was incredible and also like really scary to see it so exact in that big sort of way. But then how it affected people on the ground, I totally agree, was so different. And a point to that as well, I remember some of the readings, the tarot readings that I'd done for people prior to for their year ahead. And one lady always really sticks out to me. I remember this so clearly. Because I said to her, like, you're stuck at home. And it was so weird because the signature in the cards speaks to things like prison. And I was like, there's no way this woman is ever, she's like the straightest, most above board lady you've ever met in your life. So I was really perplexed. And I just said, look, I don't really know how to tell you this, but you're stopped at home and you're not going anywhere. Like you are held. And for some reason, this is going to go on for some time. And, you know, I wasn't looking for that specific thing. So when it came up and then the whole, you know, thing unfolded on the world stage, we were both like, whoa, okay, you know, it was a real moment. So prior to that, in terms of, and this is a question that I really, really want you to have a look at. Have you ever had moments where you forget about transits that are taking place in the sky, and then something happens in your life, a challenge, maybe some moment of frustration, or maybe even something really good, and then you think, hang on a sec, there's a transit going on that speaks to this, like, you know, and have you found you've needed to readjust, or because you know that that transit's happening, you can kind of step back from it a bit and go, okay, yeah.
Probably all of the above. I mean, I think that when you're writing weekly forecasts or daily forecasts or monthly, which I haven't done for a number of years, but when you do, you're ahead of the game. You're writing usually a couple of months in advance, maybe. So your mind is on what's happening 2 months down the line or several weeks down the line because of publishing deadlines, etc. That's one thing. So you're never quite thinking, where's the new moon today? So I've been in that. I was doing that for 13, 14 years. One of the earliest jobs I had was writing a sun sign column. And I have a lot of respect for sun sign writers now, because at the time I was sort of a bit dismissive of it, thinking, oh, this is rubbish or whatever. But it really trained me to write concisely, and it trained me to think about how can I describe the month ahead or the week ahead in a way that's going to be useful to somebody, rather than just tell them their lottery numbers or tell them they're going to. One of the magazines eventually got rid of me because they wanted me to say, look, you haven't mentioned sex and shagging as much as we'd like, and you know they're gonna get their leg over next Friday. And I thought, well, you know, other people are reading this too, and they don't want to may not want to get their leg over. So anyway, back to the point. The yes, I've been there, but also people think when you're an astrologer that you're totally aware of everybody else's transits and what's going on in the sky. And I've never felt the need to be Mr. Right, Mr. Always Right. So my mum used to ring me up and say, oh, look what's happened to, you know, Gordon Brown or Theresa May. Did you see it in their chart? And I say, well, I wasn't looking, first of all. I wasn't, I'm busy doing other things, so I haven't thought about it. They do come up and bite you on the behind sometimes, transits, or at least I think that one of the greatest tools with understanding transits or any method of forecasting is when you're in it, and sometimes you can be in it up to here, it just helps you step back. It helps you understand that there's actually maybe more meaning to it, or it gives you a sense that this is part of a cycle. With transit, we can say this is similar to what happened 12 years ago, the Jupiter cycle, or 7 years ago, a quarter of the Saturn cycle. So there's always a link, and you can always say, oh, this is similar to what was going on in my life back then. And you can connect it, find some meaning in it. And it's like having a little angel on your shoulder helping you through it sometimes, because I don't know if everything happens for a reason, and I don't know if everything happens for the best. In fact, I know it doesn't. A lot of people have tragedies and difficulties. I wouldn't ever say, well, it all turned out all right in the end. But I do know that looking at through astrology or through tarot, you can help people understand why, or at least something in the biggest scheme of things, or what they're being invited to learn at this time. And some people don't want to learn, and some people don't want to challenge themselves or challenge where they're going. But most people tuning in to our conversation, looking at their chart, looking at tarot, learning these subjects, are actually, they want to, they're questioning life. They're thinking there's more to it than simply waking up, earning a living, retiring, and dropping dead. I think people know there's more to life than that. And if you've got an opportunity to access books or the internet and to understand these things, run with it. Understand that your life has got a whole range of possibilities, and it's very different from maybe what you were taught or what your family grew up thinking themselves as well.
Yeah, I love that. And also, you know, that for me, when you put it that way, it really actually is a lot more empowering for people to say, like, be an active part of whatever transit is taking place for you. Especially, you know, some of the, and I've been guilty of this in the past, when you know that you've got like a challenging one coming up, or, you know, you've got a malefic planet coming over a certain point in your chart, or over, you know, over a certain planet that you have in your birth chart. You can sometimes, if you're if you're anything like me, you catastrophize a little, or a lot previously, I should say. But you know, if you become more of an active participant in it, again, you know, what we talked about in the fate versus free will video that we did, it really is about understanding that you have the power to choose. And if you make the choice to be a part of the transit that's happening and understand as much as you possibly can about it, maybe you can't change the outcome or the experience that you have, but you can understand what's unfolding for you. I really, really love that idea. And I think it's a really important reframe that any of these arts, you know, really need, you know, whether it's astrology, tarot, no matter what it is to be an active, you know, part of it for sure. In terms of transits, like so obviously the work that I do, there are certain ones that I track just because of the work that I do. And obviously the year ahead stuff that I do is always hugely popular. People love that. And it really is, it's nice to see. And I think, you know, even still, I look at some stuff a year in advance in terms of the astrology side of it, and it still catches me out from time to, I wish I could say it was just like a few moments, but no, there are many moments that come up. And there have been a few where I've kind of been able to step back and say, yeah, okay, I remember this is happening. And now, you know, how do I ride the tide of this wave? Because at the time, like you say, you can be really, really in it for sure.
Yes, it's true. And the best thing we can do really is sometimes take a step back and realize that even if somebody writes it, Saturn is not kicking your butt this year, or Pluto is not annihilating you next year. People do some crazy things around us. You know, people make crazy decisions sometimes that impact us.
Knee
And
jerk. Mm.
a way to look at it sometimes is to say, okay, what am I being invited to understand here? Not easy if you're in grief, if you're burying somebody, if you're splitting up from somebody. But you know, the emotions, I want to say, astrology is incredibly personal, but it's important not to take it personally. Or shall I say, life is serious, but it's important not to take it too seriously in some way.
Yeah.
And because,
as I say, none of us are getting out alive anyway, so
that's true. I think, as I said in the previous one, not I don't think there's a pass mark either. I think the reason for living is to experience life, to just live it however you want to, but to live it, not to be waiting, not to be living somebody else's life. Not, if it's sometimes our lives are about caring for others. They are about putting other people's needs first. And that's hopefully a decision we make rather than something that we find ourselves trapped in as well. So it's really, if we can, it's about consciously choosing that. I was teaching forecasting yesterday for my school in China, and somebody said, well, there's no movement. I can't do anything to change my life at the moment. And I said, I'm going to be a bit provocative here and say there are probably little things you could be doing right now. You may not be able to change the mortgage, the job, the difficulties with the family, the relationship, but there are things that we can do that just make will remind us that we can have some control over our lives. It might be a change of routine. It might be eating differently. It might be exercising. It might be having, you know, just swapping around, having a day off, doing different things. These all are seem to be very minor things, but people need to know that they have some sort of control over their lives. And very often what's around us feels very fixed. It feels like it's never going to end. And the things that we have to do is to shake that up a little bit. If we can't change the big things, change the daily, hourly, the little things in our lives. And that reminds us of our power to reinvent, to refigure things.
Yeah, I like that. I love it. I remember my sister said that to me years ago. She said, you know, sometimes if you feel stuck, she said, just change the aftershave that you use. And at the time I was like, what? And she said, yeah, just change your aftershave, use a different one for a week. And I was like, yeah, okay, it's tiny, but actually, yeah, it makes sense, you know, like, and I mean, sidebar, olfactory senses are really good for opening up different parts of memory and stuff anyway. So I agree totally. Sometimes it really is the smallest things that make the biggest difference over time, you know, and like you say, it reminds you that you actually do have that agency, that power to choose. That's awesome. Thank you for that. So here's one that I'm sure you get asked all the time. Mercury retrograde. How best, like obviously, and I can give you a story about this. So the last job that I ever worked before I got up off my desk and said, fuck this, I'm out. And I'm so glad I did. That was 2018. So not long after I'd actually started studying with the LSA. At that point, I remember, so I was in that job for 2 years. And every time Mercury went retrograde, we had this problem with the phones that would show up and then just disappear. And we had engineers out, we had all sorts, and it was just like this thing. And I was like, I wonder. And it absolutely coincided with Mercury retrograde. So talk to us about that, because it's the most common one that everybody knows and gets all in a tizzy about. And how would you best describe, like, what would you say is the best way to use a Mercury retrograde?
Right. Well, generally, remember, it's happening to 8 billion people. Yeah. So that's my first comment. And that's so if it's not really doing much in your chart, or if it's doing something in an area of our lives that we're not that active in, we may not see it personally, but we will see it around us. We'll notice the air traffic control issue that was happening recently with that caused chaos with the planes. We may not know it ourselves, but it's when it comes, it's important to be prepared. You know, we can't stop our lives for 3 to 4 weeks. We just can't do that. 3 to 3.5 weeks as it is. And it happens, we get three retrograde cycles in 12 months. And at the end of that 12 months, a fourth one starts. So really it's happening 4 times a year for about 3.5 weeks. And of course, astrologers start throwing in shadow periods, which makes practically almost every day of the year is a bloody Mercury retrograde or shadow or coming out of the shadow, or whatever. And I think most of that is bullshit, really, if I'm, you know. But really, I will say something about the shadow, because it's not completely bullshit, but it's the actual 3-week period itself. Prepare for it. Use that shadow period to think, okay, the planet of communication soon will be going backwards in the sky. So what can I be doing to respond or rewrite or re-edit or re-examine? So the idea of putting an RE prefix in front of everything is really useful, and using that time to go back, get things finished. Don't sign stuff for the future. Don't plan too much ahead. Things that you say, well, I'm going to sign this contract. I'm starting the new job. Unless you can help it, of course. We have to do things like that sometimes. I've actually signed contracts in the past deliberately under Mercury retrograde, knowing I would renegotiate later. I knew that there would be an issue later where they came back and said, we can't actually offer this anymore. And then I've realized that, okay, that's fine by me. I'm not going to sign my life away on a Mercury retrograde, but there are times that I've done that. I have just booked plane tickets and different things under this Mercury retrograde, because if I waited another few weeks for it to end, every price would be up considerably. So yeah, we have to live during this time. What I would say is just double check what you're doing, double check what you're signing if you have to sign stuff. Go in with an idea that things are not going to be running necessarily smoothly. A bit like our first interview, that sense of it is. And all of a sudden, I'm like frozen for about 2 minutes. It's always something
Brilliant.
you have to consider.
Yeah.
And I remember a wicked Mercury retrograde that was on my Neptune. Neptune's a planet we associate with beautiful things like creativity, art, music, photography, but it's also the planet of illusion, confusion, delusion, and all of the rest. And it's stationed in my sixth house, which is everyday stuff, processing information, all of that. And it's stationed on my Neptune. And the next door neighbors, I was living in center of London at that point, the next door neighbors had a phone issue, and they came along, and this is where you had dial-up instead of, this is a long time ago, and the engineer came in and disconnected my phone instead of theirs.
Oh, wow.
I had no phone for a week or so. I couldn't actually ring anybody as well. And the other neighbors had moved to Essex, and they had all their post diverted to Essex. And for some reason, my post was going with them as well. And then something else happened. So I literally had no phone, no internet, no post. I was,
Wow.
I mean, talk about Gemini rising. Without any of that, I could have quite easily ended up in a straitjacket. And it was, that was what we call a wicked one. Yeah. So sometimes it's retrograde at the moment in Virgo. And I think by the time people watch this, it may have moved forward. I'm hoping it moved forward. And it's retrograding at the moment this year and next in the Earth sign. So it's very much about how do we come back to the fundamental building blocks of our lives. With Virgo, it's about tidying up, and it's about getting systems back in order, and it's likely that those sorts of systems will go haywire to remind us that we have to have tighter systems or more effective ways of communicating. So I just say to people, back up, literally back up your work, but also back off or back up, and approach it without fear, but approach it that, okay, this is a time when, yes, you'll have to double check that email. You'll have to double check that somebody's put the right date on the ticket or that sort of thing. And just be aware, because 3 times a year for about I guess 10 weeks, 10, 11 weeks in the year, it's retrograde. And it's important to just be aware like anything else. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. I call Mercury the retrograde whore, because always doing his backward forward dance. Really, really interesting. So when you're talking about the plane tickets, so one of the things that I would try to reframe for somebody, when you were booking those tickets, are you going to a place that you're returning to, and does that count?
I don't know if it counts or not.
Okay. Just trying to find a loophole.
Yeah, when Venus and Mercury are retrograde, as they are at the moment, people do come back into your life from the past. There is that feeling of hearing back from somebody that maybe you weren't expecting to, or you lost touch with. Often, we, as astrologers, as you know, with electional astrology, when you're electing the perfect moment for something, you don't really want to set it off for a Mercury retrograde, because it's particularly if it's got a communication issue. You don't want to launch something where the planet of communication is saying, hold on, we've got to fix things. But one of the great examples that I've used over the years, and it's in my Heart of the Chart book, is the launch of Friends Reunited, that famous website that many of your your listeners and viewers won't know, but there was a website years ago called Friends Reunited. It was launched on a Mercury retrograde. And that's perfectly fitting because it was about getting back in touch with people from school, from college, etc., and reconnecting. Perfect for a retrograde. So there are a lot of things you can be doing under the retrograde rather than just sitting there thinking, oh my God, my computer's going to have a meltdown, or I haven't got the right backup disk. I forgot to do that, or I can't find this. Just arrive early and expect things to be a little bit bumpy, and but get things covered.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you said as well, like don't approach it with fear. Because as soon as you get into your head about it with all of that, especially Mercury being thoughts and stuff, like if you get into that space, you're likely to bring about the doom that you're looking for effectively, like you got to kind of sidestep some of it and just kind of roll with the punches as best as possible. I just recently come back from traveling. So I knew that I had to get up early to get the flight. And for some reason, when I heard, yeah, we need to leave at 2:45, I was like, yeah, great. I'll set my alarm for 2:30. In my head at the time, it completely made sense until, I got closer and was like, no, Raf, that's not going to work. So, yeah, absolutely. Again, case in point, sometimes it will catch you out. Sometimes it will be really funny. As you said, in your case with the really heavy one that you had, not so funny, not so enjoyable.
It's first world problems, though, for most of us. Yes, I mean, we live in a Mercury society. We depend so much on Mercury from internet connections, and we're so impatient these days. I come from growing up in the late 70s and 80s, where when you get to the 90s, you're literally waiting 10, 15 minutes for a screechy sound to connect you. And then if there's one blip or your mum picks up the phone downstairs,
yeah. I remember that.
Don't pick it up. I'm on the internet.
Yeah. And snail mail, like actual mail. I don't know if you ever had a pen pal or anything like that, but I used to love that. It was such an awesome feeling because you never knew when it would turn up. Like now everything is completely instant, isn't it? And in some ways it's really great, but I think you're right that that need to kind of slow down and take a step back. And maybe that's what a retrograde is trying to really help us do as well,
I think one of the reasons why people like delivery firms like Amazon, etc., is that you can have a surprise every day. It sort of turns up somewhere and you can open it like we used to open our regular snail mail.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
what you were saying about fear and stuff, when we look at transits, we've got to not be the transit to the client. So when we're talking about Saturn, don't scare them, don't punish them, don't get them feeling it's going to be really tough, because you end up being the energy of that transit to your client. I remember, speaking of doing that, I remember years ago, when I was at college, I had a mature student who I knew very well, and she was always down on her luck. She was always moaning. It seemed like she had really, really bad luck. I don't know whether she really did, but she'd come over and have a moan. And she was having a Jupiter transit soon. And I've been learning astrology by then for about 2 or 3 years. I so wanted her to have a lucky break and for things to be great. And I built this Jupiter transit over her ascendant. And I said, it's going to be fantastic. She said, well, I'm looking for this job. I said, oh, it's going to be great. Well, she ended up getting flu and she was in bed for those 2 weeks. And she never forgave me or astrology for building her up. And it was a really good lesson, because I realized that the transits are there. They're there from the moment you have a birth chart, from your birth. So the moment you've got a birth chart, literally get a computer or astrologer who's got lots of time on their hand to list all the transits for the rest of your life and beyond, for the next few 100 years, if you like. And so they're all set in stone from the moment you're born. You know that you're going to have a particular planet over a particular point in your chart once you have a birth chart. But where we are, what we've done with our life up to the moment of the transit, what first of all makes a huge difference. Yeah, you might be in a country that doesn't allow you to express yourself. You're not allowed to drive, or you're not allowed to vote, or where's the energy for certain rebellious transits going to go? It may not go anywhere, for instance. So from the moment we have a birth chart, we've got them all mapped out. But when we get there, it's about how do we participate in that moment. Think about, what do I want out of this year? What do I want out of life right now? And utilize the transits. I often say honor the transit. If you're having a Pluto transit, do something Pluto. I have a Scorpio friend of mine. She's got 5 planets in Scorpio.
Ooh.
And her life used to be one drama. It would that would then stop, and the next one would start the following week, and it would be love affairs, it would be jealousies and drama, and people breaking into her house to see if she's having an affair. Just
Oh my God.
drama,
Wow.
you know.
Yeah,
If you had
very
a lot of
literal.
water in your chart, you'd love drama, unfortunately, you know. Anyway, she had a very dramatic life. And I was looking at Pluto coming to her ascendant, and I'm thinking, oh my, she's going to press that button again. She's going to press that self-sabotage button, which often Scorpio can do. It's almost like, I don't want things to be nice and calm, like their opposite sign of Taurus. They want to just stir the pot and have this volcano erupt sometimes. Not all Scorpios, but quite a few of them. When you've got 5 planets in Scorpio, you may not be that aware of that need or that drive to do it. And I saw Pluto coming, and I gave her some ideas of what to do. And I said, what's going on at the moment? She said, well, I really want to kill my husband at the moment. Okay. So that was
yeah, that one's a no.
that was I'm not going to be caught telling her to do that on a video, apart from anything else, you know, or even trying to joke about it. No. So one of the things she wanted to do was to knock down an old garage just at the back of the house that had been there for years. It was rotting away. And she said, I bought a sledgehammer, and it's either going to go into the garage or into my husband's head. It was one or the other. So it was fabulous to encourage her to do the demolition work. And Pluto is about demolition, but it's about reconstructing. It's about getting rid of something. It could be purging. It could be doing like getting rid of sugar in your system, you know, going on a no sugar. Like, I can't imagine it, but apparently some people do, no sugar diets, etc. And then purging, getting rid of, starting afresh, stripping down, getting rid of stuff that you've had in the loft for 20 years. But it's ideally, it's not about sledgehammering the husband and ending up on some dreadful 2-rate crime.
Britain's Most Wanted or something.
Murder by the Sea or something terrible like that, you know. So it's always about, if you're aware of it, and a lot of people are aware of it without even knowing they're having that transit. They can just feel it. Yeah. They'll come to you and they'll say, I'm really confused at the moment. And you know they're having a Neptune transit. And actually confusion might be the order of the day. Stay like that for a bit. You don't have to have everything mapped out right now. Go with the feelings. Go with the feeling of, this isn't where I want to be. So trust that your feelings, your instinct will take you somewhere. That you'll think, actually, this relationship isn't right. I don't get a sense. I don't get a sense that he or she's being faithful, for instance, whatever. Trust the intuition, trust the dreams. So rather than being scared of any of these, go to your local friendly astrologer or teacher, or, you know, you and me, whatever. Look up something online to just understand the nature of the planet, rather than looking up somebody's interpretation, which can often be very negative online. There can be a lot of problems with that.
Especially for the malefics.
Yes, try to understand the nature of Saturn and Pluto, rather than thinking it's going to be a tough time. For me, some of the toughest transits for people are Neptune and Uranus. Neptune, because we live in a Saturn society where everything is structured, and Neptune comes along and says, okay, it's not going to be like that anymore. You've got to learn to swim in a different way. And Uranus comes along sometimes and just says, this is going to be removed, or you need to remove this out of your life, or somebody around you is going to make a sudden break or shift or change. And that can be pretty shattering for somebody who's relying on everything being the same for the rest of their lives.
Yeah,
And
yeah, for sure. We see
transits
that.
are all about the movement of life and the movement of the planet. They're simply a metaphor for where we're going in life. And you can look to them and say, okay, you're going down that road. I might choose to try that road instead. You can take their advice. You can do something a little bit different. Hopefully you can honor them in some sort of way. And they become like helpful roadmaps that we choose to travel down, should we wish. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. And what you said at the beginning of that, of what you were talking about there and the journey that you took us on is so, so interesting. When you say, like, you know, the transits that you're going to have throughout your life are mapped. So when I talked about this idea of it not being fate versus free will, and it's fate and free will, that is kind of a perfect way to encapsulate it. The transits that you're going to have are absolutely fixed. There's no way of getting around that, right? That's your birth chart interacting with what the planets and the heavens are doing at any given moment of the lifetime that you have this time around. How you get to those transits, all of the things that you do in between them is completely up to you. And actually, you know, when you put it that way, you really get to choose how you experience the transit as well. Not how other people will treat you during those times, but how you react to it, how you interact with it, what you do with the experience that you have. That's all sort of very personal, you know, stuff. That's free will. That's your choice. So I really love that. And when you said, like, when you arrive at the transit, you know, try to understand what's happening with it and be, as you say, like a participant in it. Yeah.
Well, I also think that people come to the wrong conclusion sometimes about transits. When they're learning about astrology, they'll often go back and look in the Ephemeris, which is a book that looks a bit like this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm amazed. I was on Facebook the other day and somebody said, has anybody ever looked at an ephemeris? And this is an astrologer that's been working with clients for a number of years. And I was astonished because I think, are you just looking at a birth chart instead of looking at the planetary movements? I couldn't.
Yeah, I love them. I use the, you know, Raphael's Ephemeris.
Of
I
course
get
you
them,
could.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. I buy them every year just to look at
Leo
things.
rising people need to have everything named after them, don't they? Of course. Of course.
You got me.
Trump,
You got me.
Trump Tower.
Yeah,
Trump Tower,
radiant
Raphael's
reality.
ephemeris.
Yeah, yeah, that's
So,
brilliant. And quite literal. Okay, so here's another one for you.
okay.
If any, what are the three biggest transits that you are tracking right now, or looking out for moving forward?
So in the sky at the moment. Well, again, it was interesting because I don't really write columns at the moment. So, and when I see clients, I'm focusing on what's going on in their chart. I think probably the big one at the moment coming up is the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in Taurus, you know, and we think of Jupiter-Uranus as being a great opportunity for some sort of discovery. When Jupiter-Uranus was together in 1969, we went to the moon, allegedly. I mean, who knows? I'm playing, but you know, there's a sense of discovery beyond. Now it's in Taurus. There may be a upswing in the house market, for instance. Taurus is about buildings and earth and land and property, for instance. I'm hoping that because I'm in the middle of trying to sell a house. So that may be wishful thinking more than anything else. But Jupiter-Uranus coming together I think it's maybe 22 Taurus. I haven't looked it up for a while. And that's often an exciting transit to have. Globally, look out. We learn a lot from, as I said earlier, with the lockdown. We learn a lot from what's going on in the sky by reading the newspapers. These days, no one really believes anything that's written, and everything is challenged, and everything is considered fake news. So we've sort of lost the ability to, I think, believe what we read. Anyway, but have a look. Yes, I'm writing at the moment about the planet Uranus. I'll probably throw in a bit of Jupiter. I'm doing some lectures next year in America on Uranus. And if you look at Uranus, 3 years ago, when Harry and Meghan, some of you may be absolutely sick of hearing about them, but when Harry and Meghan broke away from the royal family, it was a Uranus cycle from Edward and Mrs. Simpson 84 years ago. And she was an American divorcee who got him to renounce the crown, leave, and they were sort of in the wilderness for many years, trying to do deals. And so history repeats itself in very interesting ways with new characters. Of course, 84 years ago as well, we've got Ukraine versus the invasion of Poland by Germany. So you can be looking at history, looking in your books, looking at last cycles to get an idea of what this cycle may mean. And you'll see remarkable connections. There's just new people. The world has obviously developed tremendously technologically since then. So the idea of this World War II happening again 84 years later is done technologically as well, in quite different ways. But anyway, so the Jupiter-Uranus, come back to the more positive side of that, is I would say, because it's in Taurus, I would say it's not about taking chances, but it's about thinking big, thinking where can I leap forward in my life? But it's about planning. With Taurus, it's always about slow planning, working towards something. So for me, it's an interesting transit. Pluto moving back into Aquarius, it doesn't really move back until 2024 and then stay there. It's going to be popping back into Capricorn.
Yeah, it's like November, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, just that idea of going back into Capricorn tells us sort of Pluto's finishing off the old institutions. It's finishing off how the BBC, the royal family, the different things that we're seeing disintegrate or reshape themselves, and things on a global level having to move into an Aquarian age, which is really what's happening. So I'm excited to watch that and to see that manifest. I think we astrologers, there's going to be a big shift, of course, in a couple of years, in 2025. By then, all 3 outer planets would have moved into air signs.
Yeah.
Is that right? Yes. Uranus into Gemini. No, Neptune into Aries. That's Aries. A fire sign. Yeah. And Pluto into Aquarius. So fire and air, as opposed to earth and water. So it's that to me is a exciting time ahead as well. Just watching how the world will take shape. At the moment, with Uranus and Taurus, everybody's incredibly stubborn and fixed about their opinions. Yeah. I'm anti this, I'm pro this. You're cancelled if you don't believe me, or even if you say something that's slightly contradictory or against what I'm banning you, I'm cancelling you. We're living in times that are very stubborn in terms of this wave of Uranian collective energy of rebellion and change. When it moves into Gemini, I'm looking forward to more of a conversation. That would be nice, where people can sit down and have a conversation about some of the big topics at the moment that are so divisive, and hopefully do what Gemini is good at doing, and saying, yes, I can live with both of these.
Yeah. Just like many things and people and ideas and ideologies, methodologies can all coexist without having to pull each other apart. No, I totally get it. It's really interesting when you said that about it's like stubborn ideas and this idea of being cancelled and stuff with Uranus in Taurus, because it is very much like that. We can see that playing out. And I think really, if anything, because Uranus is the planet of divorce as well, right? It's like this complete refusal of anything that doesn't fit into your own idea or belief, or, like you can really kind of see that playing out at the moment. That's a really interesting one. I'll definitely take a look at it. That for me, I'm intrigued because it's, certainly from a whole sign perspective, it's happening in my 10th house. So I'm both excited. And when you said, think big, the whole planning aspect of it, and it's like them being ready to move with that Uranian energy and to jump in when the opportunity presents itself. So it's kind of like go for it when it shows up. I
Right.
like that.
It's about investment as well. Taurus really is. So we're going to see the markets do something crazy. I don't study the market, so I wouldn't know what happened last time it did that. So I'm not talking.
Numerologically, that's kind of backed up. So 2024 is going to be a universal 8 year. And I think certainly within the first quarter of the year, we will definitely see some really interesting pendulum swings. I think by the time we get into sort of Q2, Q3, things will regulate a lot more and actually start to be a lot better. Certainly from a numerological perspective anyway. And when you say about planning and organization, the number 8 is very much about planning, organization, structure, you know, doing things the right way with integrity and heart. So that's really cool. I like the overlap there. So a little tip for everybody out there. I know you're all watching this in avid delight and, you know, listening to all the amazing things that Frank is sharing. So a tip for you, if you're thinking, okay, I don't know about tracking any of the bigger transits or any of the planets, there's a really easy one. Our closest neighbor, Luna. She is absolutely easy to track, and you can see this stuff play out really, really literal. Like, for me personally, I will talk about this. I'll put myself out there like that. Where if you track the moon through the signs, then you'll start to understand, because obviously each sign in everybody's chart represents a different house, right? So if you're going to start tracking the moon, pay attention to the 2-ish days that the moon is in a specific sign and see how you feel. Maybe do some journaling around what your feelings are, what you feel drawn to, what is giving you comfort at that moment in time. The reason I pay a lot of attention to the moon is because I'm quite sensitive to it. And also, with me, like it will show up with when the moon is moving through my 4th, 12th, and 8th, I will eat the house. Give me all the treats, all the sugars, anything that I can cram into my my mouth for sure. And you know, usually I'll be like, okay, where is, and then I'll check and it will be in one of the water signs, because those are 4th, 8th, and 12th for me. So when I'm having one of those transits, I'm like, yeah, okay, I need to make sure that the donuts are stashed away, or I'm not baking enough for a whole street at the time. So yeah, just to give you a little insight. So if you're out there thinking, okay, well, I don't know how to track a planet, start with the moon. It's our closest neighbor. The moon is deeply personal to all of us in some way, shape, or form, and it usually shows up very literal and can really speak to a lot of the behavioral shifts and mood shifts that we're having at any given moment. So it's a good place to start.
Yes, and maybe if you've got there are lots of apps you can have that will tell you where the moon is, not just how full it is, whether it's waxing or waning, but it will tell you the sign it's in. And if you know your ascendant, then you can track the houses as well. Or if that's too complicated and you don't know your birth time, I would say look at the moon in terms of the main 4 phases: the new moon, the first quarter, the full moon, and the last quarter. And when we talk about the moon in the live session, I'll say something about that as well. But each one has a particular to-do list. So if you know, and you can, if you're not sure whether it's full or whatever, look in the sky if you can at some point during the evening or the morning, if you can see it, and then just track it from those 4 positions. That doesn't require knowing your birth time, your chart, or anything. You can just be in rhythm with the general sun-moon cycle, what we call the lunation cycle. So that's another one as well, if you're not technically equipped to know your chart yet.
Yeah, love that. That actually really feeds into another question that I wanted to ask you.
Yes.
So if for somebody that is, I mean, you basically just answered it there, but if somebody is really new to tracking a transit, like what advice would you give to somebody that is literally sort of just starting out?
Well, I'd say study the subject, really.
Yeah.
because if you're reading somebody else's interpretation, all you're doing is being told either what to do or what to expect. And the what to do and what to expect should come from within, in understanding the planet, understanding. So I would say, if you've got the time, learn astrology. And I'm here, Raf's here, you know, there are people who teach it all the way around through the year, and come from it, come at it from a place of beginning to understand the meanings of the planet and your own chart. It will make, it's one of the, I would say, learning astrology is one of the greatest investments you can make, because it really is, it's all about you, says the Aries. It's all about understanding why you're here, who you are, the rhythms of your lives, the rhythms of the lives of people around you. And it's tremendous insight. Speaking of transits, I had sometimes students will, in class, will say, oh, I had this major transit and nothing happened. And it turns out that was the month they began learning astrology. And it always makes me laugh, because often there's a monumental transit at that time, because we are being introduced to this language that is totally devoted to understanding human nature, the cycles around us, the cycles of not just, you know, you could also do your chart, the chart for your cat or your dog as well, and your marriage and your business and all sorts of things as well. But I would say, yeah, I would say learn it, so you're not dependent on somebody's forecast that really isn't specific to you. And I even if you put in your details and stuff, it won't know your context. Only you know that. And be your own guide, I would say, as well.
Awesome. Before I get to my next question, so as Frank said there, you know, learning astrology, I can definitely tell you, learning astrology made me a better tarot reader. 100%. Like, I will say that until the day that I die, because it really is very true. I've been really lucky to study with some great teachers. Obviously, you kicked off my whole journey. You and Richard Swatton, I will be forever grateful to. I then studied with Adam Ellenbass and then Heather from Astrology with Heather. So I've been really lucky to have teachers that are just bloody brilliant at what they do, and, you know, very insightful, and you've all got your own really interesting styles, which I absolutely love. But going back to the point that you made, if you are going to learn, do it with somebody that can absolutely take you through the whole thing and really get you to think about it from a perspective that is personal, and that is going to encourage you to ask questions. As you've seen throughout this whole talk, I've asked Frank a million different questions, and that's how I learn. That's how I interact with things. So, Frank, what courses are on, and where can people find them?
Well, they can have a look at londonschoolastrastrology.com, and in there, under the freebies and the tasters, there's actually our introduction to astrology, the birth chart, for those who want to go a little bit further. It's £25. You get that money back off the 101 course should you join the course as well. You just enter the details in there as well. So that might be a good investment without, if you're just thinking about learning about the chart and wanting to go a bit further. There are obviously a lot of other courses that we do for different levels and different things, but yeah, so an introduction may be useful to get an idea of the complexity of it, but also how specific it is to you, and to have your own birth chart. It's one of the great moments of all our lives is when we first look at our birth chart, and then we start to analyze it, and it feels like it's ours. You know, we may share it with somebody born in the same hospital that we never meet the same minute, but it really does feel like it's our guide, the blueprint of our lives as well. So that's a very special moment to have, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And to unfold, when you see your chart, you know, it's not just a picture with, you know, strange symbols and pretty colors. Like, that literally represents the moment that you came into the world and everything that you brought with you, you know. So it's really, really exciting. Also, I have to tell you, the electional course, the electional 2-day mini course that you did, I thought was phenomenal. I still go back to it time and time again. I still obsess using some of the materials. I'm like, I just need to get this right. And you know, again, a lot of the things that you outlined in that course I thought was brilliant as well, because there were moments where you said you need to be prepared to let some of it go in order to have the overall direction that you're going in. And sometimes it really is that as well, you know, especially with you know, when you're looking at a transit. Okay, so final question.
Yes.
It is a bit more advanced, but how do you mitigate like an outer planet transit? And, you know, do you, when it comes to, I guess, you know, people's personal transits, do you really pay as much attention to them as you would like the inner or the personal planets?
Okay, so what I would say is the outer planets, and we're talking about Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, they usually last about 18 months to 2 years in our chart. Now, you mentioned Richard Swatton. Now, Richard uses a 5-degree orb for a Pluto transit. And I always joke, there's no way I'm having a Pluto transit for 5 to 10 years. Thank you very much. You know, I'm not going to do that. So I'll just stick with the 1-degree orb, you know. So I would say the outer planets tend to last 18 months to 2 years. Of course, you can be feeling them earlier than that, depending on how intuitive you are, what you're looking for. And there's a lot to be said for actually preparing for your transits and saying, okay, next year is going to be very dynamic. This year I'm going to build. I'm going to be earning a lot because next year is the sabbatical, or the doing just jumping off the cliff into something new in my life, you know. So it's good to know what's coming up in that way. But the outer planets are often associated with events in our lives that seem to be beyond our control. Now, the actual event may be beyond our control. It might be that with a Pluto transit, for instance, we're living in a very nice home and the landlord says, you've got to be out in 3 months because I'm selling. That feels a bit like a Pluto transit. Yeah? And we might think, oh my goodness, why is this happening to me? Poor me, this is terrible. Instead of saying, okay, this is really non-negotiable. That's the word I use for Pluto transit sometimes. And in the face of that, what do you choose to do? You can choose to prepare. You can choose to chain yourself to the house if you want. I mean, that's, you know, if you want to go down like that, that's up to you.
Swinging and kicking.
Part of the demolition job, if you like, with my Scorpio friend. Maybe she's there.
Not going fucking anywhere.
Or you can think, okay, this is a chance to maybe to move somewhere where it's smaller, more compact. I can get rid of stuff. There's a reason for this being introduced into your life. That's what I'm saying. So honor it in some way rather than resist it. A bit like Uranus, something can come out of the blue. It could be an opportunity. It could be a shock. How do I want to deal with that? What is it waking up in me? So we can't affect everything else going on around us and all the things that people do, quote unquote, to us, you know, or that impact us. People make decisions. You know, it could be that I could look at my mum's chart and then look at the moment that one of her children got divorced, and it could be devastating to her, but that's something that somebody else has chosen to do, for instance, you know. So we have to look at really what it is we can be doing on a personal level, motivated by what we need at that moment, in times that appear to be beyond our control. Now, the inner planets, the Mercury transits, the Venus transits, sometimes the Mars transits, but more sort of Mercury and Venus, are opportunities to inform our lives while we're having the big transit. So one of the things that I teach when I teach forecasting is to use the inner planets as triggers for activity during a bigger transit. So say you've got Pluto on your moon at the moment, whatever aspect it's making, anytime Mercury connects to that Pluto moon, it gives us an opportunity to write about it, that big transit of 2 years, because Mercury is writing, talking, expressing, writing a diary, sending an email, getting information, writing to your local MP, whatever it is you need to do under that transit. So I use the inner planets when they connect to the bigger transits of the outer planets to do activities of that nature. So with Mercury, it's writing, it's information. With Venus, it may be, building bridges, reconnecting with people, getting your friends around, having a bit of fun, enjoying, having a day off from all the drama of what may be happening in your life, or going on with the family, for instance. So same with the sun and moon, and even Mars as well. Mars is a great time to get active and to push things forward, to fight for things for yourself, to stamp your individual mark while you're having the bigger transits. So I tend to say those, while you're having the big ones, will dominate the year. They'll dominate the landscape. The inner planets like Mercury and Venus will be times when they connect to the big transits by degree, I mean by sign and degree, a days, sometimes a couple of days, sometimes maybe a few more days to really do something useful that feels like it's in your control, in your hands in a way. Does that answer your question? Was that what you were asking?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's funny because it reminds me of something you said earlier about people quitting sugar, and because you were talking about the Pluto. Interestingly enough, I just not too long ago come off of a keto stint. I did 3 months. Now, anyone that knows me, as I said, when the moon is moving through the 4th, 8th, and 12th, the sugar binge it's really bad. It's better now. I'm somewhat more in control of it. But just recently, when Mars trined Saturn, those two planets were both trine to Pluto in my natal chart, so to my natal Pluto. And that coincided with the moment that I started my keto stint. And for 3 months, I tell you, I never touched any sugar. I didn't even have a craving for it, which for me, like everybody was like, any minute now, we're going to find him passed out in an aisle in Tesco's surrounded by sweet wrappers. And it just never happened. And so when you say that, like, I can totally see how that might show up for someone. And I use that to illustrate a point to people out there. Like when you look at your transits and see how they show up for you, sometimes they can show up in really very literal ways. And we're talking there about Pluto, which is one of the outer planets. So you can see there how that sort of shows up. And it's interesting when you say like they can have an element of them feeling like they're not in control, like you're not in control of them. It's not so much that I didn't feel in control. It's more a case of I had a goal that was more important. And that was what was kind of really driving me. So I don't know, if maybe it had played out in that way. The other thing as well, for anyone that is going through or about to have a moment where they are forced to move, I can tell you as someone who's moved 12 times in the space of 10 years, twice, 2 of those were where landlords sold properties. So when you mentioned that, I was like, trigger. I know that experience. Every time you move, you raise your vibration. And I can tell you that without a doubt, because it's happened every single time for me, no matter what the state of the property was that I went to, whether it was bigger, smaller, nicer, more dingy, the neighbors were bad, whatever it's been, my level of understanding and consciousness has shifted in a way that's been much more beneficial for me. And I've taken more out of the environment and the experience. So even in the moments where it was really, really hard, it's actually been great for me. So, if you are forced to move, as Frank said, ask the question, what am I actually shedding here? What is it that actually needs to be released at this moment in time so you can meet that move or that change in? And let's face it, when it's a move of home, it's personal, right? Because your space, even if you don't own it, your home is the only sanctuary really that you have besides your physical body, right? So it can be really disruptive and it can feel really awful and painful. But if you are having that experience, I promise you, your vibration is raising in some way, shape, or form. And if you ask yourself what you're learning from it, you will know why you're leaving the place that you're in. I just wanted to leave people with that thought. And also pick your brains on one more thing.
Yes.
You mentioned the shadow period earlier, and I agree, by the way. I think sometimes it's a bit much. Like, we can't just stop living because a planet is retrograde, because we'd literally never get anything done. I tend not to include shadow periods. I usually just look at when it starts, you know, and for transits like that, and the same with lunar transits as well, the day before, the day of, and the day after the actual transit. So like the station, you know, direct, station, retrograde, etc. But you mentioned that you would kind of take a little foray into the shadow periods.
Yes. Well, just to say that the shadow period and the post retrograde period, I'm sure there's a name for that as well, I forget. It's really about the degree that a planet goes retrograde. So imagine that Mercury goes retrograde at 15 Virgo. The that degree is very important to keep a note of, really. The shadow period is from the moment, maybe I should really have a diagram to show this, but it's from the moment that the planet Mercury, for instance, gets to a degree that it will eventually retrograde back to. So it's really saying the shadow period really simply is saying that anything I do between now and the retrograde will be revisited. Mercury will go back to that degree eventually. So Mercury might go back from 15 Virgo all the way back to 2 Virgo, for instance. The shadow period starts at 2 Virgo when it first comes into the area that it will eventually go retrograde back into. And the post one is about Mercury getting back to 15 degrees once it's been retrograde. And then, yeah, so it's really about those degrees. It's about the degree that it goes retrograde and the degree that it starts to go direct at further back in the zodiac. So really, very simply put, the shadow period is really about saying, okay, the next week or two is about anything that I do now is great preparation for a revision. So it might be that you want to write an important article in the next couple of weeks or design something. And then the editing starts at the retrograde period, for instance. So it's nothing to be worried about, or it's not an extended retrograde. It's simply knowing that Mercury is coming back to the area in that shadow period. So anything you do in those first week or so before the retrograde will be revisited. And that can really play into using that time wisely as well, rather than be in any way anxious about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. Maybe you could see the shadow period as kind of like where you take a run up to do a jump. So you can actually use that time rather, you know, you can use the energy wisely rather than kind of being slave to it. Awesome.
And you know that it's coming as it goes retrograde, as it's slowing down. Be aware that it's slowing down, a bit like at the full moon. Be aware that there's full spotlight. Be aware of the new moon. Be aware of these cycles, and just understand that they're symbols for what we're doing. They're metaphors for what we're doing in life. And once you've had the retrograde, it then starts to speed up and get to the point where it went retrograde. Again, that's a sort of extended period of just coming back into your own and being able to move forward again. So it's the planets. This is why people have been fascinated with studying the planets for so many years, is that they're just fascinating to watch in their cycles, particularly the sun moon. But we'll get to that the next time.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. So as you may have noticed on the social media posts that I put out and on the YouTube community tab, we will be going live on the 22nd of September. And I'm really looking forward to that. So we'll be looking at your moon sign and how you might be able to use that and to navigate that. And also, Frank has graciously agreed to pick out maybe 4 or 5 examples of people's charts if they're happy to share them, just to have a quick peek and to maybe give you some insight. And obviously, I will be there as well, maybe chiming in with a few lines of things to say. So as ever, it's been a pleasure. It's really an honor to have you here. I really, you know, aside from the live that we're going to do, I would love to have you back for a million other topics at some point. Thank you so much for being a part of this series. Once more, you can find Frank and all of his works and courses and books as well. You can find on the LSA website.
Yes, I think so.
Also,
There'll be a button you can press, yes, somewhere.
yeah, awesome. That is the London School of Astrology.com. Check it out. They've got great courses. They've got lots of short courses as well. So if you don't want to commit to something larger, there's lots of like two-day workshops and stuff, which are brilliant. So we will see you on the 22nd of September. It's going to be great. It's going to be a lot of fun. And with that said, Frank, let everybody know where they can find you once more, please.
Yes, londonschoolofastrology.com, or you can type in Astrologer Frank and find me on Instagram, but not, I think I'm on Twitter as well these days, but I don't tweet. It's X is, I've completely missed the whole change. But yes, londonschoolofastrology.com or Astrologer Frank. Thanks, Raf. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, guys. Take care. We will see you soon. As we said, on the 22nd, 6:45 p.m. Make sure you are there. It's going to be one for the books. I can definitely tell you it'll be a lot of fun. And I think at that point, we're out of the Mercury retrograde. So all good stuff to come. All right. Take care, and we'll see you soon.